I remember a few years ago I came across this term, influencer. I think it was Instagram mostly. Instagram influencers, these young people who post a lot of videos that teach a skill like makeup or other things, and they become influencers. But the term is wider. You can apply it across the board to people in power, political power, economic power, cultural power, and they all have something that people aspire to. What is that one thing that kind of brings them all together in a kind of unified thing that is so attractive and compelling to people that makes them say, I want that?
I guess ultimately it's success, as it's defined by the majority of people.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be successip.
Of course, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean, and everything is measured, your value. Well, what's wrong with that is if that is the measure of your value, if you're not successful, you're not valuable.
You're useless.
You're useless. And that brings people to that dark place inside where they go, I'm not good enough. And because I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of connection, I'm not worthy of relationships, so they isolate themselves, and we have an epidemic today of isolation, of people who just don't...
Loneliness.
Loneliness. The people who just don't connect out of the fear of being found out to be unsuccessful, to not have accomplished anything, to have nothing to show for.
So these influencers seem to have something that people want, and they want to emulate, they want to imitate.
Yeah.
We learn by imitation. We are made like that, even our mind, our neurons are made capable of imitating other people.
Yeah. You can't avoid it.
So it's sort of an inborn mechanism. That's how we learn. That's why we talk about following models.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about apprenticeship or discipleship or using other terms that illustrate that.
Yeah. And I guess you and I as kind of spiritual leaders and thinkers in that area, we can look at the models that are so held so highly in regard today and go into a bit of despair about, oh no, are these the people that are influencing our young people? Are these the people that are attracting populations to vote for them? And there's a blindness about success. If somebody is successful, it's almost like it doesn't matter how they got it. It doesn't matter the number of people that got hurt in the process, right? Take for instance, millionaires and billionaires. I want to be a billionaire. And probably everyone secretly thinks that, if I only had £1 billion, I wouldn't suffer anymore. I'd be okay. And I'd have more value to myself as a person, But rarely do we think of, the price you have to pay to get there and the price other people pay for you to get there. That just becomes out of sight and out of mind. And that makes me despair. Sometimes about myself, when I imagine myself, imagine if somebody came and just gave me £1 million, all my problems would disappear. I would be awesome. And people will think, somebody gave him £1 million, so he must be very valuable. And then I feel bad about myself. But that's kind of a fantasy that goes around. I came across this thing once. It says, everyone has their rich life planned out. It sounds a little bit like we're moaning about it. Doesn't it? Like, what are you offering? So those are successful people. Everyone who wants success. Who doesn't want success? Name one person that says, no, I don't want to accomplish anything. I don't want success. I don't want to be liked.
I want to be a loser.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be a loser, right? And there's so many things that if you do the right thing, you're going to lose. If you make the right choices and care about people, you're not going to be seen as a very good leader, or because you're not strong enough, or you're not assertive enough, or you're not aggressive enough. Okay, so given all of that, what's the alternative? Are we just moaning about it, or are we going to present maybe an alternative?
I guess there maybe two ways of looking at this. On the one side, I think we need to counteract our inclination to negativity by looking at the positives side of this kind of relationship.
So maybe it's not all bad, you mean?
What I mean is, these people have something to offer.
Okay.
That people want.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be the starting point. I remember when the hippie generation started, and the uprising of the youth in 1968. A lot of people were concerned in the conservative, in the status quo.
What were they concerned about?
Oh, these people had long hair.
Who does that?
Smoke marijuana.
Right.
They wear short skirts.
They play weird music.
They sleep around and all that, and so on.
Make love, not war. They're dangerous people, these.
Yes, some of them showed up in church and they were rejected because they were not like decent Christians, you know.
Wearing a suit
and I remember there is a book written which is neglected today by a Brit, Stuart Briscoe. Its title is "Where Was the Church When the Youth Exploded?"
Right.
And
so are we paying the price now for not listening then?
Absolutely, and it was a prophetic call. What he basically says is, these people had some deep longings to which this movement responded.
Right.
So, instead of looking at the longings, we became disgusted about the solutions they found, and were unable to serve them.
Right.
So maybe we can look at this phenomenon today and say, okay, what are these people longing for? It may be wrong, it may be good.
And in offering a different model, that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah.
Because Christianity, at its base, in its beginning, which is the person of Jesus, right? It offered a different model.
Absolutely.
A radically different model.
Yeah.
That even today, if you take that model and you go into a regular church and you start preaching about this is what we're called to be, people will go, I don't want that at all.
No, of course.
The price is too high. It's too complicated. It's too hard. I just want success.
Oh, let me give you an example. The world and the church is full of seminars on leadership.
Right.
Nobody.
How to grow the church by using social enterprise models.
How to be a good leader.
Corporate management.
Nobody wants to be a good follower. Everybody wants to be a good leader.
Right,
it's about authority, about assessing yourself, and so on and so forth.
Because we admire good leaders.
Yeah. But Jesus says, if you want to be a leader, you have to be the servant of all.
Yeah.
You have to take the towel and wash the feet.
That's not very cool, though.
Of course.
Being the servant of all.
Of course.
I mean, that's not cool.
So that's sort of putting things upside down.
I think we need
being
coffee.
Counterculture.
We need coffee.
Good.
And then when maybe we bring a kind of, not solution, but suggestion, a kind of pointing to, Christianity started somewhere else and we kind of derailed with the 4th century and, Constantine from a position of vulnerability and humility, we got into power. And the whole paradigm kind of got turned upside down. But I don't want to get into that before coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Into some coffee. passage gives us a different model of the kinds of people we really actually should be looking up to. They have different character traits. They do things differently. They are in a different way. And I'm talking about the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus presents us with a completely different paradigm. It flips this whole idea of success, achievement, power, domination, and gives us a completely different model.
It's very interesting to look at this text and where it's placed in the story of Jesus, because this tells us something about the meaning of it.
Yeah.
What happens here is that Jesus spent the first year of his ministry in Judea, and then he moved to his birthplace in Galilee. There, as we discussed in the previous conversation, he invited some people to follow him. They were with him for a while, about half a year or so, and he chose among them 12 as his disciples. And immediately after that, he preaches the Sermon on the Mount, which is a sort of program of his ministry.
Yeah.
And basically what he says, where he begins with the Beatitudes, which is an introduction to the Sermon on the Mount, is, this is the kind of people I want you to become.
Right.
This is a sort of process. I'm beginning with you here.
Right. That's what it all started.
And I want you to pass it on to others.
Yeah. I saw a sermon on the Beatitudes that basically said the Beatitudes is, if you want to be like Jesus, that's where you start. That's basically it. It's a description of who Jesus was. And the preacher actually said, I have to admit, put my hand up and say I don't like the Beatitudes. Because it's so difficult to live up to. It sets a standard that's so high and so radically different to what the culture is moving into, about admiring people who are successful and powerful, who have, an army behind them, like the president, right, commander-in-chief and so on, or people who have lots of money behind them. Jesus had none of that. He did have the armies of angels, which he did not use, and he did mentions that. He does mention that, but we don't see Jesus as someone who fits that profile of the kinds of people that are admired today. It's completely different.
Isn't it interesting that people can cope with the high demands, at least in their mind, in their lives, a different story, with the high demands of the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the Beatitudes, they don't seem so attractive.
Yeah. You don't want to display them as much as the Ten Commandments. And maybe that's about power and domination as well. Because the commandments are kind of a top-down, thou shalt or thou shalt not. The Beatitudes are, blessed are. It's like, take it or leave it. It's, if you want to move into that, you will be part of the kingdom. You will be part of this program.
And the difference
if you don't, well...
whatever.
just look up to the rich and powerful and see where that gets you.
The big difference between the two sets of things is that the commandments are about things you do. The Beatitudes are about who you become.
It goes right at the core of who you are.
So you can sort of have a checklist.
Yeah.
You remember there was a young lawyer who came to Jesus and said, Master, Rabbi, what can I do to inherit the eternal life? Leave behind the illogic of the question. You don't inherit anything by doing something,
Yeah.
You inherit it by birth.
And it smells like a setup. Yeah.
Jesus leaves this behind and he says, do the commands, and you know what to do, this and that. And the young man says, oh, I have obeyed this from my youth.
Yeah.
From my childhood.
Yeah.
And Jesus looked at him and loved him, but he said, you just miss one more thing,
Missing one thing, yeah.
Sell everything So he raises the bar so high, and the young man cannot redefine this in a checklist. Because what the kingdom of God is, what the message of Jesus is who you are as a person determines what you do.
So spiritual growth, spiritual development becomes far more important. It becomes the starting point of what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to emulate a model that is so radically different. That leaves us with the difficulty of applying the message of the Beatitudes to today's world in a context where if you actually do those things, you're not going to get awards, you're not going to get congratulations and pats on the back. You might get what the Beatitudes actually suggest is persecution and rejection.
And we don't like that, of course.
I mean, who does?
Who does,
I don't like persecuted. It's tiring to be persecuted, to not be liked. Sometimes when you're facing the choice to do the right thing and be disliked, or do the wrong thing and be popular, I don't know what I'm going to go with.
But there is a price with everything that is valuable. The higher the price, the more valuable the thing. And it's interesting that the Beatitudes begin with blessed are the poor in spirit, and it ends with you should rejoice when you're persecuted, because if this process takes place in your life, you will come at the point where you will be persecuted. Paul says, whoever wants to live a godly life will be persecuted. Not can be persecuted, will be persecuted. And what do when this happens? We start complaining, people don't love us. We are so lovable, but they don't love us. There's a price to pay of being countercultural.
Yes, of course. And that's why we don't often do that.
But that's the way to change, to bring change in the world. That's the way to be influencer. You are not an influencer if you're going with the flow. Flowing against, swimming against the flow may be the way to be a change agent in the world.
Yeah, and that, there's a difference between admiring someone and wanting to be like them. Like there are qualities that I look at people and I admire something about them, and I go, I admire that they can do that. I admire that they are peacemakers, or that they can handle persecution, but I don't want that for myself.
I think the difference is made by the willingness to pay the price or not. So I can admire something and say, this is beautiful, but I can't do it. In fact, I'm not willing to pay the price.
Not willing to pay the price.
So it all boils down to this thing. And we have to admit there are areas where we don't want to pay the price, and we'll probably sort of stop the process of change in those areas.
Indeed, and the Beatitudes actually are not new entirely. Jesus is not bringing a completely new message. This comes all the way from the prophetic tradition of Micah and the other prophets, where Micah says, what else does the Lord require? And that's by the way, pay attention. This is the essentials. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. These are not values, shall we say them, or traits of character that we generally appreciate in people today, that we are, or maybe we admire but we don't aspire to, because that's great. It's nice to be kind, but if you're too kind, you're not a good leader. You're not assertive enough. Humility, it's good, but you also have to be confident and look like you know what you're doing, because otherwise people just will not follow. So this is not new. Jesus is reiterating things that and reframes them into a contemporary society that did appreciate and aspire to power and money, and they looked up to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, who were rich landowners. Yes, they lived holy lives. They lived by the 10 Commandments.
They checked the list.
Yeah, they did. But there was one thing missing. And aren't we not, by aspiring to richness and influence on that level, also missing that we're doing all the moral stuff? Like we talk a lot about morality. But when it comes to internal change, internal transformation, we're not really sure. We're not really sure that we want to go. We're not really sure if we should believe Jesus, that that's a good thing to do those things.
Of course, it's costly.
Yeah.
It's costly. We want to be leaders in the terms of the world today. And Jesus says, that's not my way. My way is be the servant of all.
Yeah, yeah.
But who wants to be a servant?
It's not cool.
Everybody wants to be a leader.
Yeah, it's not very cool.
We want to go and even pay big money to be in a seminar, in a workshop, and learning how to be good leaders. But who wants to be a follower?
So maybe we need seminars on how to follow.
Yeah.
A lot more than how to lead. How do we actually put this in action? This framework.
And I think this program unites our previous discussion with the discussion today. Come and be followers of me. Learn from what I do.
Yeah.
Jesus did not change anything in what he was doing when he invited people in his ministry.
Yeah.
And he did not change anything in what he was doing when he invited the 12 to be like him and learn like him.
Yes.
There is one thing that changed slightly. He started to explain to them why he was doing what he was doing, what he meant when he was saying something. So he was inviting them into their kitchen.
Right.
Let me show you how.
Let's have a coffee. Let's have a coffee and a fried fish.
Imitate me, okay? And then you get your own style.
Yeah.
If you look at the 12, they each had their own style. They ended in different ways, in different areas. They had their emphasis, Only John put his head on the chest of Jesus, He was the mystical, Peter was the fiery one. He always had the right word. And so they didn't have to become exactly in temperament like Jesus. They had to be themselves, but they started.
It's not about personality.
It's about following some essential core, and this is defined in the Beatitudes.
Yeah, it gives us something to look up to appreciate, to aspire to. And what's maybe missing in us as people who say we follow Jesus is really to believe Jesus' word, that doing those things and aspiring to those things actually improves the quality of our lives. And we get to that thing that Jesus came to give us, which is life in abundance, which we're not going to get if we aspire to richness and power and domination. But, listening to what Micah said about humility and kindness actually is going to change the way we feel about ourselves. If our value is not about achievement and proving ourselves, but it's actually about how we feel inside about ourselves, about how we interact with the world through meekness and gentleness and openness, we might discover that that's a better way, that that's a viable alternative.